Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Perform Happy podcast. I'm so excited to be hanging out with somebody who was at her peak in gymnastics when I was my peak fangirlness. I mean, really, I haven't ever reduced my gymnastics fangirling, but 96 was when, the world was watching and I was watching. And so I'm really excited to introduce a former US national team gymnast from 93 to 97, part of the bronze medal winning 95 World Championships team, an Olympic alternate to the Magnificent Seven, who set program records at Utah for 20 years for perfect tens. They just got knocked off by Miley O'Keefe in 2022. Congrats to Miley. But Theresa Kulikowski-Gillespie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited to chat with you. So I love to start at the beginning. Can you kind of share how gymnastics became such a big part of your life and helped you channel the perfectionism that you had as a child?
Yeah, so my dad was in the army and we were stationed over in Germany, and my older sister was actually doing gymnastics. And at the time, I was like 2.5, and you had to be 3 to start the classes. And I would go with my mom and sister, and I kept running in on her classes. And so my mom's like, "Well, you just let her start." And so I started at 2.5 years old, younger than the required age. And I would say that it was like love at first sight kind of a thing. And I absolutely adored the sport. I slept in my leotard. I slept in beam shoes, my grips, even though my hands were too small to wear grips. And if I wasn't doing gymnastics in the gym, then I was doing it outside of the gym. So yeah, that's kind of how I got my start in it.
Yeah, I mean, most of us do, right? You can only do so many
Yes.
backflips on your parents' bed before they're like, okay, let's get this girl some instruction for better
Yes,
safety.
yes.
Okay, and then did you just love the whole journey and fly right through? Were there any big challenges along the way to your elite career?
Oh, a lot of challenges. Yes. I mean, so we moved to Colorado from Germany when I was 4 and just dove right into a new gymnastics facility. We found a new gym before we even found housing in the military housing. And I think I had my first mental block when I was like 5 or 6 years old because I had learned a back handspring at a very young age. And I just all of a sudden didn't want to go for it. I was so scared, and you get that feeling where you like do a round off and then balk in the middle. And I did that so many times, and kind of had to relearn the skill at a very young age. And I joke about it now, but it was like once I got it back, I would wake up every morning, stand up and do a back handspring because I was so afraid of losing it again. And at that time at our gym, I would not recommend this. We had a chicken shirt that people had to wear. And if you were afraid of doing something, then you had to wear the chicken shirt and go sit on the bench. So I
Mhm.
don't think I actually ever got it. My sister did. My sister and her friends sat on the bench a lot. Um, but yeah, I mean, I remember having mental blocks from a very, very young age.
Yeah, we had a chicken beam in my gym that, you only have to go in the chicken beam if you're afraid. It was like the fatter, wider, lowest low
Yes.
beam. And I just thinking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was even when I was coaching, we called it the chicken beam. But,
Yes.
the shame around fear at that time was so different. I mean, me standing
Yes.
on a beam in 1996 crying, the answer was go or get off my beam. I mean,
Yep.
there really wasn't any flexibility. There wasn't, not that I know of, that
Yeah.
where the coach would go, well, okay, let's talk about this. It's like, well, you did it last week, so figure it out.
Yeah. What's wrong with you? Yeah. There wasn't much of a conversation around it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Well, so
like
then these
going,
little kids
go
are
ahead.
left to like do it in their bedroom over and over, to try to like, there's got to be a better way.
Yes. Yes. And I think we're finding that there are better ways. But yeah, back then it was just kind of like navigating it on your own. And interestingly, and I don't know where I learned this, I was always very much a visualizer, and my mind was both my best friend and my worst enemy, and in those moments that it was my best friend, I remember being afraid of my series on beam. I was doing a back handspring, and we were doing routines as a group, and I was really nervous. And so I imagined in my head, it was a VCR back then, like putting in the cassette tape, pushing like play on the cassette tape, seeing it, and then rewinding and then playing it again, and then like imagining that I step up and go. So it was very interesting. Like, how did I learn that? But it was just a natural thing to be like, I can see this in my mind. Let me just play with this a little bit. And it helped me a lot from a young age.
Yeah, I mean, imagery, visualization, another word for it is the reason I fell in love with sports psychology is because I did the same thing. I'd fall asleep doing bar routines in my head. When I was a coach, I'd sit kids down and say, just imagine it in your mind. And then they would make the correction for the first time. And I learned it at gymnastics camp. It was like, I'm sold. This is what I want to
Yeah.
do. I mean, so obviously there was mental training. It was happening, at one time at gymnastics camp. But yeah, I agree. I was like, this is magic that you can see
Yeah.
something in your mind and then it just happens. I mean, it's
Right.
really powerful. So what other tools you
Yeah.
used visualization? What other tools did you use to kind of help you through the mental side of your gymnastics as a young gymnast?
Mm, well, yeah, because fear was just such a prominent experience. So actually what I had to do when I was 10, I first went elite, and I had a new coach come to my gym, and he was kind of pushing me, and I was being pushed too far too fast. And that's when the fear really kicked up. So I would like cast handstand for my Takachev and bail out. I would run down the vault runway and I would bail out. I was just like getting afraid of everything. And to me and my parents, it was kind of like, okay, we need to do something about this. And I was burnt out at 10 years old. And so we actually left that gym. So I had to make a big pivot in my career. I don't think the mental skills that I had at that time would have helped me enough. And so we had to back away and be like, okay, I'm not going to compete for a year. I'm going to a gym with kids younger than me. I was always with the big kids. And so I actually had a year of like no competition, going back to the basics, doing ballet, like doing all of the really basic fundamental things. And I didn't compete at all. So that was when I was 11 years old. And then I kind of got a kick in the pants when I was 12 and went to a zone meet and was like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. But that's when I found aerials. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that I like to say about fear, that there's no amount of mental skills that can solve being on the wrong progression for your brain.
yes,
And
that's
if
so
you're on the
true.
wrong progression that your brain is looking at like hot stove, don't touch. This is not safe. Your brain's supposed to freeze you up. Your brain's supposed to bail you out. This is good and we
Mhm.
need that function. We need to not walk out into traffic, right? We have to be able to go freeze when we go, "Oop, there's a car coming." And so
Oh,
that part of your brain is it's critical and you can't. I mean, so many young gymnasts are being told to like don't listen to that part of your brain,
yep.
which then when mental blocks start to spread across the events, it's typically because your brain has been sending you this alert, this quiet alert, and then it gets bigger and louder, and it's finally like, you are not safe. We're not doing
Yes,
anything until you can
that's
start
so
listening to
true.
your survival instinct. Your brain will just go into like, I'm not doing this anymore. So
Yeah,
bravo to your parents for knowing
so
that
true.
you needed to be in a place where you could feel a little bit more emotionally and physically safe.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, you think about a 10-year-old elite now. I mean, that's pretty extreme for those little bodies and minds.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. And it takes a lot of conscientiousness and awareness on the part of the coaches and the parents to make sure that kid is protected in the way that they need to be able to navigate the pressures at that age.
Yes. Okay, so
Mhm.
then you go to the zone meet and you're like, "Oh, I wanna win." Okay, so then what
Yeah.
happened?
Well, I was dead last, I think, in that competition. But I saw Tom and Lori, and like Donnie Thompson was there, Kim Young, Missy Leopoldis, and they were all three together as a team. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're so good. And I saw that they were from Colorado. And I'm sure it was like immediately as I got back from that zone meet, I was like, Mom, I really want to train with aerials. Like, what can we do? Because we lived an hour away at that time. And I have two sisters, and they were very heavily involved in, I think both of them were in dance at the time. My little sister was like a phenomenal dancer. My older sister was a great gymnast and dancer. So we're like, how can we navigate this? And so we took a trip down to aerials, and I just remember thinking, oh, I really want to do this. I really want to do this. I don't know how we're going to. So my parents drove me an hour each way, stayed there for 5 hours, because we were training from about 2:30 to 7:30. Then they drive me back. We'd get home about 9 o'clock and then do it the next day. And we did that for about 6 months. And then the whole family finally moved to Colorado Springs when I was about 12 and a half, 13.
And when the
And
family does that feel like additional pressure, or was it just like, phew, thank you. let's let's be in the car less.
I think I was so, I mean, I was only 12 and a half, so I knew that it affected my sisters, but I didn't know to the extent. And I think in the end, it turned out for the best for everybody. But in the moment, like it was really hard for them to leave their friends, to leave their activities. And it was more than just activities. It was like they were at the same level that I was in gymnastics. And so it was uprooting the whole family. So I think hindsight's 2020. I ask for forgiveness kind of right now, but I think in the end it all worked out. I think we were all like happier since we moved
Yeah,
there.
I'm sure. Like not having your parents around for whatever 7 hours a day has got to be not beneficial either.
Yes. Well, and it
Yeah.
was one parent, they would split up. So it was either my mom would bring me, my dad would take care of them, or vice versa. And then my dad was working 3 jobs so that he could pay for everything. So he was exhausted, and it was just a
Yeah.
lot of stress on the family
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, I bet. And then
Mhm.
and then you as you're training along, you end up on the national team.
Mhm.
And I mean, I just can't even imagine what that experience was like, you know, with the
Well,
people who were running the show at the time.
mm, the national team clinicians. And well, I was 13 when I made my first national team, and that was just an ordeal because a week, no, the week of championships. So I had to go through to the zone meet by myself because Donnie had already made it. Kim had already made it. And I was like on my own path now because I wanted to catch up to them. So I qualified through the zone meet. I had a great classic meet, and then I made it to championships. And the week of, I had peeled off bars and I had a rug burn on my foot, and it was getting really red and swollen. And I was just like, oh my God, this hurts so bad. And I would just tape it tighter, but it was red, it was pulsating. So I go to the ER and I have massive blood poisoning and cellulitis. So I get on IV antibiotics. I miss the flight out with my coaches, and I have to go a couple days later with Donnie's dad, actually, who was an ER doc. So I didn't even know if I was going to compete at that championships, but ended up having a great meet and made junior national team. And it was very cool. I have to say, it was very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. And then the ability to go and win a medal with the world championship team. I mean,
Mhm.
seems like, things are on the up, and I'm
Mhm.
guessing that the Olympics were, on your mind throughout
Oh, the
your
Olympics were on
youth.
my mind from the age of 4.
So you were like,
1984. Yeah.
yeah, well, of course, the,
Mary
1984
Lou.
Olympics, Mary Lou Retton, I think everyone wanted to be an Olympian after they watched Mary Lou.
Yes, she inspired the world of gymnastics, and she definitely inspired me. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
at that moment, I was like, I'm going to win the Olympics, and I had it written on my wall, like I'm going to win the Olympics. And so, of course, yeah, I wanted to at least make the team, if not win it. So that was my
Yeah.
dream. But I
Yeah.
was always
One.
injured, so yeah, like I had a bad hamstring tear that kept me out for like a year and a half, and just yeah, constantly trying to navigate injury, training, being where I needed to be, but feeling like I was falling short.
Yeah, well, and now, because you have the perspective of a PA and you are aware of health and wellness, if you look back, I mean, most 13-year-olds who are training at that level are injured. I mean, it's
Mm,
major underfueling and
yes.
overtraining. in combination that just would burn these bodies out. And it's almost like there was this culture of disposable bodies. So, well, if you can't do it, there's six more behind you. So figure it
Mhm.
out or, lose some weight. I mean, just so toxic. I mean, was that your experience during that time?
Tom and Lori were a different breed. We were very, very lucky because I always felt like they cared about us as human beings. And to this day, Lori and I are such dear friends. And I've always thought of her as like a second mom. So like, I really felt comfortable with Lori and Michelle because Michelle Dussert came in and coached us. Um, And I know that they probably look back and they're like, we would have done things differently too. If they would have been aware of how much I was limiting my food intake and not my food intake, my fat intake, I'm sure they would have intervened and been like, this is not good for you. Um, but but to their credit, they weren't overly controlling. So they weren't weighing us. They weren't talking about our weight all the time. And so in that way, I think we had a healthier environment compared to what I know of other elite gyms. We lucked out in many ways.
Yeah, which is great. I mean,
Yeah.
there are so many stories of, it just makes me like go mama bear on I want to make sure these kiddos have all the information and all the education and their parents have the education so that you can just have it be a better experience all around. If you had
Yes.
had that proper fueling, if you had had, optimal training hours. I mean, we can't, whatever. If I would have, could have, should have, it is what it
Yeah.
is. But
Yeah.
luckily we get to educate people to make better choices for their kids now.
Yeah.
So, okay. So then you go to Olympic trials for a 7-person team and you get
Mhm.
6th place. And Dominique Moceanu and Shannon Miller petitioned in, and you didn't make the team. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like?
Oh, I mean, bittersweet is the word that I always use because it was like, this was a lifelong dream, and not many people ever get that close to making a lifelong dream. And I did, but I mean, I talk about this in my book, but I was like standing off to the side, and I remember so vividly them announcing the team. And in those days, for whatever reason, they didn't announce the alternates. Like now the alternates get to go out, they get acknowledged as being part of the team. And in those days, they just didn't. So these 7 fabulous athletes are out on the floor, and I was like off the side of the podium in this dark space, like starting to tear up, not really knowing what to do, so many emotions. And yeah, I don't, it's really hard to put into words, but I do remember, an hour or two later, I was eating dinner or something, and I was like, I'm going for 2000. I'm going to go for the 2000 Olympics. I just have to. So I had this resolution in my mind that I was going to do that. But then the reality hit once I got back to the gym, and it's like, you have to keep training at this level just in case somebody gets hurt. And that was hard because at that point I was like, I think I just want to be done. I need a break. I need a mental break. I want to go on vacation. I haven't gone on vacation in years. So it was this limbo that was very, very hard to manage for the next month or two while we were in between trials and the Olympics.
I had the amazing fortune to go to the Olympic trials this last year and watched Shane Wiskus. I don't know if you were tracking his journey at all, the men's
Yes,
gymnast.
yes.
And I mean, watching him celebrate after each event and have the meet of his life. I mean, the crowd was insane for him. It was
Yeah.
incredible. 3rd place all around. I'm pretty sure it was 3rd or 4th, and he was not
Oh,
chosen to the
didn't
team
make it.
because of the
Oh,
algorithm, because the men's team decided they were going to let this algorithm choose the team. And I mean, you look at like looking at him, it was devastating. I mean, I think the entire arena walked out of there feeling like anticlimactic,
yeah,
watching that
I bet.
happen.
I
And
bet.
And then, then we go on and we get this great story of the men's team gets their medal for the first time in, 16 years or whatever since 2008. And I'm like, good job, but gosh, poor Shane,
Mean. Yes.
Shane. And I mean, I just can only imagine what that's like to be. ready, prepared, good enough, and then
Mm.
just it's a math issue. It's just a math issue. There's like just too many great people with great things to offer in the US, and what an
Yeah.
amazing opportunity for, our team. But yeah,
Yeah.
I thought of you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I remember watching the Olympics and, Carrie Strug doing her second vault. And I was at my teammate's house because she was hosting a party for everybody. And I had to leave the room because I started crying so hard because it was like, I almost won Olympic gold medal. I was like that close. And you're also witnessing history of USA gymnastics. So it's like, how do I hold these feelings? I'm 16 years old. I want to be there. I want to be happy for the team. I'm devastated right now. Um, so I was by
Mhm.
myself for a couple minutes, and then like my teammates started trickling in one by one, and they just held me in this huge group hug. And, I felt very, very supported because most of those girls I didn't train with directly. A lot of them were like the level 10s and level 9s. And I think I was an idol for them. Like they were able to kind of look up to me as an elite in the gym. But I became good friends with some of them. And so I just like, thank you. I needed
Mhm.
this.
Yeah. I mean, the power of your support squad when you go through a disappointment. It's it. I mean, that's what gets
Yeah.
so many people through the dark spots.
Yes.
I mean, I think we all probably have a moment of like crying and just being, what do I even do with myself? And then you just are like, I just need a hug. I need someone just to be in
Yes.
this space with me, even though it's not going to make it better, but it'll make it feel bearable.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh. Oh, goodness.
Connection.
Yeah. And so, okay. So then, you end up training. You're training for 2000.
Mhm.
Um, but then what brought on your retirement?
From elite gymnastics, well, yeah, I mean, I went through my first bout of depression. I didn't really know what was going on, but I feel so bad for my coaches because I would go into the gym just like crying. I had such a bad attitude and I just didn't want to be there. And so it took a little bit of time, but then I got my spark again and I'm like, okay, I'm going to train for nationals in 97. And we kind of wanted to change the scenery. So we went to Lake Owen Gymnastics Camp. It's not there anymore, but we had been there a couple times. And I'm like, well, this is good, change of scenery, get to be around other gymnasts. And we were training one day and I was doing this drill for a 2.5. I was doing a double full and then bouncing half. And I just happened to bounce half and I felt like the pop and burn in my knee. And I was down and I'm like, I have no idea what just happened. And within like 5 minutes, it didn't hurt anymore. So we thought, oh, I guess we're okay. We ended up driving an hour or so, like, because like going is out in the middle of nowhere. So we drove an hour to get an MRI. The first MRI didn't show any, like, nothing. None of the images came up. So we're like, okay. So we go back the next day and it was a torn ACL. And the doctor was like, I'm pretty sure this is what's happening. So then I go back, I see a doctor at the OTC, and it was confirmed. So I tore the ACL and had to undergo surgery. And at that point, I just thought, I think I need to pursue college. I had never thought about college actually. Like it was maybe in the back of my mind, but I was so dead set on the Olympics that I just didn't even think about it. And then I thought, well, I'm a junior in high school. I guess I can think about alternatives now. And as I went through my rehab, I had amazing therapists at the Olympic Training Center and ended up getting my strength back. And yeah, just kind of like having a pretty low key senior year and then committing to compete at Utah.
Yeah, well, and then Utah, I mean, you were just smashing records at Utah.
Mm.
So, but at the same time, it seems from my perspective that there was kind of two things going on. You were performing very well, but then kind of having an internal struggle during that
Mhm.
phase of life. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I mean, I would say it was a roller coaster because my freshman year, I actually felt, well, let me backstep a little bit. The first half of my freshman year was difficult because I was like trying to get my strength back in my knee. I was trying to adjust to life away from home. I definitely felt homesick. I was struggling a little bit with disordered eating. But then once the season started, just something shifted and I had fun. I mean, we were a great team. we danced a lot. We were goofy. Denise Jones and I, she was a sophomore or junior, I think, and she and I just like clicked and had so much fun. Um, and I can honestly say that that whole season, I felt really confident. Like going into competition, I definitely had my mental routine. I had my meet ritual, pre-meet ritual, pre-routine ritual. Like I was training that to a T. And then in competition, I was able to have fun.
Mm.
And, it just, everything fell into place for NCAAs that year. And that's when I went all around and won balance beam. But there was just this level of self-trust that I had for whatever reason. I think the training was there, the mental training was there. I wasn't like perfectly fueling myself, but I think I was better than normal. So that first year was good. And I left on a high note, but I also was sensing the pressure, of, oh my gosh, I'm a freshman, I won nationals. Now, how can I build upon that? How can I at least maintain and even get better? And so I went home over the summer and I didn't train gymnastics a lot, but I was a little bit overly compulsive about working out. Came back my sophomore year and was in super shape, but I slowly started to lose a little bit too much weight. And I went into the season feeling decently strong, but then like 3 meets into the season, I was actually feeling pretty strong. We were at a competition at LSU, started on bars. It was a great meet. And then I was doing a watered down vault, just a Yurchenko layout, and just landed a little locked legged. And I felt the same kind of pop and burn on my left leg. And I tore the other ACL. So that was just such a, I guess shock is the best word because I felt like I was really, really there. I was putting everything together. I felt like I was at the top of my game, and then to be sidelined, but like that again was just heartbreaking. And I became very, very overly obsessed with food because it was like, well, now I don't have gymnastics and I don't know how to handle all these emotions. So I'm just going to get a little bit more controlling with my food intake. And I'm going to make sure I don't gain any weight. I'm going to make sure I don't lose my edge. So my sophomore year yeah, it was pretty difficult. Um, and then continued to have some ups and downs with the disordered eating stuff. But my team was great. I had very good friends, and my junior year was able to come back and win NCAAs on beam. That was a good redemption story, I guess. And my fourth year, I actually, again, I felt good. I felt strong. I felt pretty balanced. I was officially a senior. I graduated from college, but I had that fifth year. So you're called a super senior. I got a medical hardship because of my torn ACL my sophomore year. And after that NCAAs my senior year, I was really thinking, I think I'm ready to be done. I think I've done enough in the sport. I had finished third at NCAAs and we had a good team competition. I graduated, and for whatever reason, there was something in me that just felt like I needed to keep pushing forward. And, my fifth year was just a year from AGL. Like it was just a year from heck. It was really, really bad. My body fell
Mhm.
apart. I was burnt out on every level. They found a tumor on my spinal cord. So I was like trying to navigate injuries and all this invasive medical testing and thinking, I need to be done. I need to be done. The whole time I was thinking I need to be done. And I just didn't really listen to that still small voice.
Mm. If you could go back and do it differently, would you?
That's a good question. I mean, I hate to look back on the past and say it shouldn't have gone that way because it did. But I think if I could have done it over, then I think I would have been done after that fourth year. I would have saved my body, I would have saved my mind, I would have like gone out on a high note. I would have felt like I was leaving gymnastics on my terms as opposed to a tragic injury like what happened at NCAAs the next year.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess, of course, hindsight.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you can only make those, but I think it's interesting to just give the idea of you don't have to just because it's what people do. You don't have to. And
Yeah.
and that some people get that sense of, I feel really done. And I got that sense at 14. And
Mm.
I can look back and go, well, if I hadn't had the fear, or if I'd had better strategies to work through the fear, if I had had better support, I could have been so
Mm.
much better. But at the same time, I can look back and go, but I was done. I mean, it felt
Yeah.
in my core, I felt like this is not for me anymore. And
Mhm.
I mean, and I talk to athletes, sometimes they'll be like, a mom will be like, talk to her. She wants to quit. Let's like basically talk her out of it. And then, I
Oh,
just listen and I'm like, well, it sounds like you're pretty clear.
yes.
And if you had no fear, what would you do? You
Mm.
could just be empowered to go, if you weren't making any decisions in what I call the fog, fear, obligation, or guilt,
Oh, I
um,
love that.
what would
Fear,
you do?
obligation, or guilt. Oh, wow, that's a good one.
I mean, it's tough because I'm like, oh gosh, sometimes those decisions of, well, if I wasn't doing something out of obligation, I just wouldn't go to the party. And a friend of mine's like, then don't go.
Yeah,
Don't
right.
go.
That's a life. Yeah, that's when you take through life with decision making.
Yeah.
Fear, obligation, or guilt. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, okay, then you went
Mm.
and I mean, gosh, yeah, we could just talk all day of your amazing, amazing journey. I'd love to get into some of the mental tools that you have used, throughout your career, but then also, mindfulness, self-compassion. You have this
Mm.
arsenal of incredible mental tools that have helped you navigate life's up and downs. Would you kind
Mhm.
of touch on some of your favorites and give some
Mhm.
tips on how others can use them as well?
So as an athlete first, is that you kind of want to hear what I did as an
Whatever comes to your mind. I would love
athlete?
anything that we can use all of us stressed
Okay.
out people to be to be happier in our skin.
Yeah. Yeah. As a gymnast, like I said, I was always very fearful and very nervous in competition, anxious as can be. And in college, I feel like I finally learned my routine. So before I went to bed every night, I would imagine myself going through the competition. And I had a little ritual that I did before each event. So before beam, I would like two people before me, I would step aside, I would go through my routine physically, just kind of like a walkthrough. Then I would sit down and I would completely relax my body. Like I would go limp and just let my body go completely limp, breathe, and just feel the relaxation in my body. And then I had an anchor. So after I presented, I would look at the beam, I would do a shoulder roll as like a little anchor, and then I would do a click, like a little click with my tongue. And it was like, you've got this. And so what I had done before that, though, is every night when I visualized, I would visualize that whole process. And my anchor would be this feeling of confidence in my body. So it was like I conditioned my brain to be like, you've got this. And then once I competed, I just let it go. Because prior to that, I was always a thinker in competition. Like, let me think through this skill. And then obviously we know that doesn't work. So my practice was really letting go and trusting once it was time to compete. So that was a lot of what I did as an athlete. And then following, I don't need to, we don't have enough time to go through the whole journey following, but I came into mindfulness and self-compassion because when I left gymnastics, I was struggling a lot with identity loss. I struggled with the disordered eating, struggled with like not knowing how to rein in the drive. And so it's just like push, 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 no matter what. And I had read a couple of books as an athlete. One was The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. I had read another book, Working Out, Working Within, and they alluded a little bit to things like mindfulness. So when I was done with gymnastics, I really started reading more about those things. I came into Tara Brach's work on self-acceptance and self-compassion. I started doing just basic body scan practices, which is what I teach a lot for athletes, is just how do we connect to our body in a way that's not critical? And because as athletes, we have great self-awareness. Most of the time we have great self-awareness, but it is tainted, or maybe that's too strong of a word. that has this overlay of criticism and self-judgment. So how can we reconnect with our bodies in a way that is like kind and accepting? So for me, I started just doing body scans. And then Tara Brach's work just completely resonated with me. And I started doing a lot of the self-compassion work. And then Jack Kornfield, he's a meditation teacher. He is all about loving kindness. um, and I'll share this one story. So this was I was maybe 29, 30 years old. I was in the Army and I was still kind of struggling with this stuff. And I did a course with Jack Kornfield, and he allowed us to send in questions or like call in questions. And so I called in my question, what do you recommend for those of us who are struggling with our relationship with our bodies? And he said, well, I recommend a year of loving kindness practice and for yourself, like only for yourself. You don't need to worry about sending it out to the world yet. Just like every day, send yourself some love and care. And I did that. And I'm not saying that it was like a miracle and I have a perfect relationship with my body, but it was very impactful. And for me, those have been the tools that have helped me when that really harsh inner critic starts to come in, or the judgment of you're doing this wrong, you're not doing enough. I notice that voice because it's still there, and I can bring in some, okay, how do I sit with this? Can I feel my body? Can I feel this breath? Um, can I bring a little bit of self-kindness to this moment of suffering? Because that's what it is. When we judge ourselves, it's a moment of suffering. So yeah, for me, it's been a lot of the mindfulness, self-compassion kind of mantras. May I be held in love. May I be held in compassion. No wonder I feel this way. It's okay that I feel this way. There's a lot of acknowledging and creating space for my experience.
Yes, and that's something that I 100% believe in. I mean, there was a rough patch I was in where I was listening to Tara Brach on YouTube just, like, to fall asleep because it's just I'm like, "If I'm gonna be awake, I'm gonna at least fill myself with good stuff that's gonna make me feel like
Yes.
things are possible," and so, yes, so many amazing teachers that you mentioned that I've definitely followed as well, and so I
Oh, that's
try to
cool.
teach this to kids too, or, this like the self-compassion break with Kristen Neff, where you
Mhm.
acknowledge this is hard, you open up to the idea that you're not the only one suffering, and then you talk to yourself with kindness, and I noticed that athletes tend to resist this because they feel like if I pat myself on the back when I do a bad job, I'm going to lose my edge. I'm going to lose my fighting spirit. I'm going to get lazy. So, what do you say to that?
Oh my gosh. I just had a conversation with this other uh, former basketball player the other day because she has a program. She trained under Kristen Neff. She has a program called Reset, and she brings compassion to athletes. And we were talking about this exact same thing. Um, because quite honestly, it's a thought that comes into my head still, like, oh, if I'm kind to myself, I'm going to lose my edge. And for me, I have found it just makes me more resilient. So I think part of it is like, how do we get the right language to first get them to buy in? So it's like, okay, let's use the right words that make sense to them, that don't bring up this fear response of like, I'm going to lose my edge. I'm not going to reach my fullest potential. I'm going to be soft. I can't be kind to myself. Um, so we can use the right language to kind of get them to at least try it. And then they'll see that, oh, it actually makes me more resilient. It actually makes me reach my fullest potential in a way that is smarter training, not necessarily harder or more harsh. So the language, I think, is very, very important. I'm trying to think of the words that her name was Ashley Kuchar.
I have interviewed her on this podcast.
Oh, you
Yes,
have?
she's amazing.
Oh, how
Yes,
funny. What a small world. Like, I
it
think we're
is.
all, yeah, it's wonderful to connect with this community.
Yes.
Yeah, so using words like opportunity and resilience and
Mm.
excellent, like these words that have a little bit of a sharper edge to them, but they bring in the compassion and the kindness to the extent that they're needed.
Yeah, well, and the language is so powerful. Even switching from pressure to challenge, or I need this
Mhm.
skill to I want this skill can
Yeah.
change what your brain is doing in your body. I mean, so language is so important. And I think a good
Mm.
example that I try to show for teaching kids how to be compassionate to themselves is I ask them, okay, when your friend is struggling, what do you say? They're having a mental block, they're bailing out a vault, they're frustrated, they just don't want anyone to talk to them. They're in that place.
Mhm.
What would you say? You know, maybe nothing because they don't want to
Mhm.
be talked to at all, but what are the thoughts you would send to them? Like, "Oh, man, I've been there. That's so rough, but I know you're gonna get through this. You got this." And I'll have kids write down, like, what are all the things that you would say either in your mind or out loud to that kid?
I
And
love
then I
it.
ask him, "Okay, when you're the one bailing out and struggling, what kind of stuff do you say to yourself?" I know for me, it was, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? This is so stupid. I suck." You know, and I have the kids
Yes.
write those thoughts down. What do you say to yourself when you're in that position? And I go, "Okay, are they the same or are they different?"
Mm.
And if your friend was standing next to you going, "Wow, you suck. You're really bad at that. What's wrong with you?" Would you trust them?
Yeah, that's true.
Would you
Trust,
trust them?
yes, yes.
No, and if like what you said, when you're at the peak of your performance, you are in ultimate full self-trust. So
Yep,
can you trust a person who is talking to you that way?
right.
No. So
Yeah, that's
be
so
the kind of
true.
person that you would trust on the sideline for yourself.
Yeah,
Be that
yeah.
good coach, be that great teammate that, gives you that hug in the dark spot, that gives you
Mhm.
the okay, it's just another day. We're gonna get through this. And from that place, I mean, that's where you can get an edge. Is I
Yes.
so I if that helps anybody to see that
Yeah,
compassion is empowering, not
yep.
deflating. That's been my
Right,
experience to see.
yeah,
But you have to take a leap of faith and try it before you'll know if it
you
works.
do. Yeah, and I think, it doesn't mean that you don't work hard in the gym. I mean, you still have to put in the work, you still have to put in the hours, but I often teach these things as a buffer because it's like you need that sharp edge sometimes and you need to push and you need to like bounce the boundary a little bit, but if you're constantly doing that, you burn out, you get injured, you hate the sport. So it's like, let's push a little bit and then let's have the practices and the inner strengths to then like bring some balance and harmony into the nervous system.
Mhm.
Um, I like to think of things from a physiological perspective because I think these kind of populations, like the military and athletes, they want the hard science of
Mhm.
how's this going to help me? And if you
Yes.
can say, oh, it changes this part of your brain, or it actually, Yuka, actually, the one who
Mhm. Yeah.
told me about your podcast,
Yeah.
she does all this brain science stuff. I'm like, yes, we need more of this from different angles
Mhm.
to get people to buy in and then actually implement it on a daily basis.
Yep. Yep, and it's so cool. I mean, I'm such a science nerd, and more and more I'm studying. I'm trying to explain it to 11-year-olds. I'm like, stay with me. I'm going to get sciency
Right.
for a moment, but I promise it will be worth it. Because when you
Yeah.
understand what's happening between your brain and your body, it's like a no-brainer to meditate. I mean, you are insulating the fear portion of your brain with like a cushion when you
Mhm.
meditate. It's, I mean, it's incredible. But yet
Mhm.
I still can't get myself to do it more than, but we're all on our journey, right? We know what's
Yes.
good for us and we're all on our journey. And oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to hang out with you today. This has
Yeah,
been
you
so
too. It's been
inspiring.
wonderful.
So if
Wonderful.
people want to, work with you, what do you offer as far as your services within your company, your wellness company?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm focusing on my book, Beyond the Chalk Box. That's a great resource for parents. My mom actually read it and she's like, I think a lot of parents would benefit from this. So I'm trying to get that out into the world. It's a good message. It has a lot of tools and practices. If they want to work with me one-on-one, I can give you my email, my website.
Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about what you offer in your one-on-one work.
Yeah, so with usually I work with the athletes, but if parents want to work with me, that is definitely an option. At first I just really get to know them, like get a good history, like why they're doing the sport, what they want to get out of it, their goals, their dreams. And then I like to start with mindfulness practices that are accessible. If it's a young child, then definitely you got to tweak things. A lot of the people that I work with are a little bit older. So we have to change the language, but yeah, teaching mindfulness in a very basic way, like how can I connect to my body in a kind, gentle way? How can I breathe in a kind, gentle way? Sometimes I record guided meditations for people as a mindfulness teacher. I like to do that, like get what does your safe space look like? And then I kind of create a guided meditation that takes them there. They can do it before they go to bed. They can do a pre-meet guided meditation. Um, yeah, and it's very personalized. I don't have any kind of like cookie cutter, this is what you're going to get in working with me, but I want to ultimately empower whoever I'm working with to trust themselves and to reach their fullest potential while also nurturing their health and well-being. So that's my deep intention with whoever I work with. And the way we go about that is just kind of pull from all the different tools, loving kindness, self-compassion, mindfulness, breathing.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh my gosh, I want to bring you into my community to teach all these things. I'm like, I want to learn. I want to hear. So,
Oh, I'd love
yeah,
to.
this would be awesome. Well, Teresa,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing
Thank
your journey
you.
with us. It has been such a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.